Hello, everybody.
Hi, Miriam.
Hey, good evening.
Evening.
Hi, Miriam.
Welcome, Beth.
Hello.
You, Beths.
Too bad.
There you go. They look more
Are
student
you actually at home?
or off, you know.
I am.
Nice.
It's good to be
Do you know
home.
what home is?
A lot of travel for sure. I'm enjoying the snow. We're finally getting a winter.
Yes.
I know it feels like winter has shifted, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At some point in my childhood, it was actually December. Then it became January and it just keeps kind of moving.
People were cross-country skiing down my street.
Yeah.
Where I
Yeah.
grew up, winter was sometimes in June. But usually in May, there could be snow. So
Wow, where did you grow up?
the Upper Peninsula, northern
Oh,
Michigan, right on Lake Superior. Super long winters. There's a little bit of summer in the middle of it. That was it.
A Youper.
I was a Youper, yeah. All right, 7 o'clock. I'm going to call the meeting to order. All the commissioners are here, and just for the benefit of the recording, Miriam DeFont, Chair, Beth Wilson, Robin Harrington, Mary David, and Scott Kahn. I think I got everybody. So welcome, everybody. We're going to have a few changes in our agenda because we're continuing 2 of our public meetings. Carrie, can you just let people in? I'm gonna stop letting people in. You can do it. So we'll be moving the agenda around a little bit since we have some time open at the beginning that we weren't planning on. Let us proceed. We have at 7 o'clock, we had a public meeting for a request for determination of applicability for 70 Cleeville Road. Neil Jackson for a septic system upgrade. And Neil, are you here? He is not here, or maybe there's somebody on a phone. I don't know who that is. All right, well, we're gonna have to hold on that until he shows up. He's supposed to be here.
I think we
All
have a
right.
hand raised already.
Tom Seifert. You have a
It says
question?
on my agenda that item is postponed to April 13th.
It is, but because
I
we
just
have
wanted to make sure.
scheduled,
Oh, okay.
excuse me, because we scheduled a public meeting, we still have to open it and then continue it.
I'm
So-
sorry. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't a misunderstanding. Thanks.
So we have 2 public meetings that will be continued because we were unable to do site visits due to snow conditions on the ground. So
So do
Yeah,
you
I thought
need a
that was Mr.
motion to-
Jackson one you're asking for.
I'm sorry, Mary? Yes.
You need a motion to continue?
Well, we really need him to be here. So we really should not be doing that until he comes. Though
Okay.
with his consent. So I think we want to wait till he shows. In the meantime, why don't we go through the minutes? We have 3 sets of minutes to approve for tonight. December 30th. Has everybody had a chance to look at them?
Yep.
Looked okay to me.
Okay.
Me
Short,
too.
just 3 of us, I think. So Mary, Robin, and I think is my recollection. So other folks, I guess, will have to abstain. So somebody want to make a motion to approve?
Motion to approve minutes for 12:30.
Second,
I second.
David,
Aye.
DeFont, I, Harrington.
Aye.
Okay, then we have January 12th.
Again, look at me.
Thank you, Carrie, for your hard work. All right. Anybody else? Any discussion?
A motion to approve minutes for 1/12.
Okay, second,
I second.
okay, David,
Aye.
Font, I, Harrington,
Aye.
Han, and Wilson.
Aye.
And then February 9th.
They look good.
Look good to me.
Robin had a couple of small typos that I corrected, nothing substantive.
Well, I really enjoyed the one where it said I abstain from voting to close the meeting at the end. And I'm always like, aye.
Me first. A motion to approve the 2/9 minutes.
Okay, all right,
Second.
second. Okay, David,
Aye.
Font, I, Harrington,
Aye.
Han,
I wasn't there for much of it, but I'll say aye.
and Wilson.
Aye.
Okay, great, we got those taken care of. Is Mr. Jackson here yet? Neil Jackson. Okay, I'm trying to think about if there's some other pieces of information we can, or items we can cover while we're waiting. I wanted to just give the commission an update on the Community Preservation Committee's process of applications. So there are 2 applications before the CPC this year. One is a historical project to do restoration of stones in the cemetery, the Shutesbury Cemetery. And the second one is being sponsored by the regional school district for a track and field project, a large track and field project. And I just wanted to update the commission about this. The CPC will be having a public hearing on March 23rd at 7 p.m. So they'll review those projects and the public will be able to weigh in, and then the CPC will vote. And if they're approved by the CPC, then they go to the annual town meeting in June. And one of the concerns, there've been some concerns about the health and safety of the track and field project because it is mandating artificial turf. And as a result of those concerns, the Amherst Board of Health and the Pelham Board of Health have issued statements saying they're not in support of the project. And the Leverett CPC and the Pelham CPC have voted against the projects. So those projects are not going to go to a town vote in those towns. So CPC funds will not be used from the 2 towns. If there's any questions, I can answer them, but I just wanted the commission to be aware of that process. The concern about the turf, as I understand it, is one, there's a growing body of research suggesting that there's PFAS used in the processing and manufacturing of artificial turf that has been found to leach into groundwater. And also there's research showing that artificial turf contributes to more athlete injuries of a variety of kinds. And the track and field project is built atop a wetland. So Tan Brook is a perennial stream that is culverted right under one of the turf field that is to be converted. So there's been some requests of the regional school district to reconsider. Oh, the other issue with the artificial turf is it costs twice as much as a grass field would. So there's been some members of the public who have been asking, and the other 2 CPCs ask the regional school district to reconsider the choice of artificial turf and to pivot to a grass alternative that would be less expensive. At this point, I don't think that's happened, so, or been considered, so. Just wanted people to know. Okay, is Mr. Jackson here yet? He is not. I'm gonna check my email and see if maybe he didn't have the link or something. All right, let me see if I can email it to him in case he. Says he's gonna be here. Okay. Any other, let's see what other items we have that we can move around. One of the issues that was on the agenda is to talk about a sign request for the boat launch. And I don't know if anybody from LWAC is here. Is Mark Rivers here? He may have come later, so I don't want to move that up in the agenda in case he shows up, since it was LWAC's request. Let's see, what else do we have? So we're meeting Monday night at 6 p.m. to begin talking about the bylaw regulation review. And I guess one of the questions I had for the commission is, is there any particular way you want to tackle this? Do you want to do it section by section and just go through it in order? Or is there some other approach you want to take?
I was actually thinking we could do it section by section and divide it up. Like, one council member looks at one section and then another, just to sort of, I mean, we all should eventually read the whole thing, but maybe for like the first review where there might be a number of changes to a particular section.
Okay.
One person could just take charge of one section.
Okay. Well, why don't you guys think about that, and later tonight, let's make sure we get everybody to commit to what sections they want. I see that the highway superintendent, Tim Hunting's here, and we had invited him to come. So I'm going to suggest that so Tim doesn't have to wait. Maybe we should talk to him first, if that's okay. Hi, Tim, welcome.
Hi.
We have a hearing that we're delayed, waiting for the applicant. So this is a good time maybe for us to talk to you.
Okay.
So you saw the email. I think what we just want to know is if you could just give us an explanation, because we heard this concern about, kind of what was the work you were doing and where were you doing it?
Okay. We were just picking up brush from an ice storm that happened in, I think it was in January, and that's all we were doing. There was, it was close to the road, and we picked it up and loaded it on trucks and took it down to R.H. Roberts' pit where he grinds it into bark mulch. So that was it. We didn't do any cutting of trees or anything like that. We just picked up what was on the ground.
Well, there were some limbs. I mean, I saw some limbs being cut.
Well, there was one. I mean, if it's a dead limb, I'm going to cut it. So there's a great big pine tree on the left as you enter Montague Road. And, if it's in the course of our work, if there's a dead limb that I think I should cut, I will. There was brush down from a tree that came down that the power company put there. We picked that up, and there was quite a bit of dead or brush from the pine tree that got broken off in the ice.
Okay. Did you do any stumping?
No, not at all.
All right. Well, Tim, Don, you're here, right? Don Walklock, see you. Don, you had written to us So do you have any comments or questions?
Yeah, I mean, I must be mistaken. I thought I saw some trees and stumps going by in the trucks. I mean, that part of it, I guess, isn't really all that mattered much to me. My concern was only that, the DPW is, supposed to be able to not have to file on these things, that they're able to do their road maintenance without concerns. And it seems like there's some sort of a communications gap there. You know, if you're doing work on the side of the road that's in an area where there's a wetland, you still gotta file for it. Doesn't matter whether they want to do a work there for the day or not. It's the way that's supposed to be handled is, you're supposed to contact the Concom. If that's too much of a pain, I mean, you can't do that every day when you're out doing the work, right? So I thought that this MOU was gonna settle that problem, so that they didn't have to be calling every time they're doing work in the vicinity of a wetland. But, you know, I mean, this seems to be like a communications gap to me. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong.
One of my questions, Tim, is whether we could set up a process to make it workable for you so that you know you have some clarity and about where the Concom wants to look at things. And I thought perhaps maybe even once a week, a phone conversation to see if there's anything that we need to go out and take a look at. I'm wondering if that would be helpful, if we could commit to getting a commissioner or two commissioners to go out in a timely way so as not to hold you up. We're not trying to jam you up or hold you up from doing your work quickly. I know that, you know, you have a very busy schedule and we don't want to interfere with that.
Okay, well, I just wonder where all this is going to end. I mean, are we going to need permission to grade roads? Are we going to need permission to mow roadside? Are we going to need permission to mow lawns? I mean, where does this all end?
Well, I think we just want to avoid situations where after the fact, we're all saying it would have been good for us to have a conversation.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're picking up brush where there was several towns affected by this ice storm. And we were probably one of the first, if not the first, to pick up all the brush. We chipped what we could, and then we picked up the dirty brush and put it in trucks and hauled it away. I do find it interesting that Mr. Wakaluk can see what we're doing on Montague Road from his front porch, but we won't go there, I guess. But, you know, we get accused of things all the time, and we're just trying to do our job.
Sure.
And we can't even go out and pick brush up that came down in an ice storm. You know, I'm at a loss as to how we can proceed and, you know, function as a highway department.
Well, I don't think any of us is telling you can't pick up brush. I think that's certainly appropriate, or maintaining roads or maintaining and cleaning out culverts and doing the other maintenance activities that you need to do. I haven't heard anybody suggesting you can't or shouldn't do all that. I think what we want to do is maybe set some parameters of where we might want to have some conversations. I think that what we've talked about in the past is if there's going to be any repairs of any culverts or any enlargements of any stormwater features, those would be things we've talked about wanting to look at. And I would think that tree removals in a resource area, so in a wetland, if there's trees that need to come down, we're not going to tell you can't do them, but those are the kinds of things that might get approved through an emergency certification, which we can do them on the spot. So it shouldn't, we shouldn't have to slow you down. And obviously,
Okay.
if it's a public safety concern, then you have to do what you have to do. And you shouldn't wait for us. We certainly wouldn't ask you to hold up doing something that is so urgent that it's a public health or safety issue.
Right,
That-
I mean,
That's a given.
at the outset of this storm, we actually got called in by Shelburne Control, and we had a tree down across Prescott Road, and no traffic, was going to be was moving. And we went down and we took care of the tree, and that's the kind of things that I think we need to do immediately. I am certainly not opposed to culvert replacement, repairs, things like that. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that.
Great. All right. Does anybody else want to add something from the commission around what we're talking about?
I think the concerns were mostly work that was being done in resource areas. And if there was a question about it, those are the ones that we would want to look at. Or
Yeah.
talk about.
I think that's what we would like, is be able to, if it's an emergency, public health and safety, then obviously don't wait for us. We would never ask you to do that, because that's not our job to interfere with that. We wouldn't want to. But if it's something where you're going to be doing some maintenance in the coming week, if we could talk on Monday and we could come out and take a look at it, then again, we're not going to tell you not to do things, but we might want to issue an emergency certification, or there might be something where we say, no, that really needs to be an RDA. Or we might say, this isn't a resource area. We don't have any jurisdiction. We're not going to require anything.
Mhm.
So those are kind of the options, but it's really about having some communication and going out and just making sure we're looking at stuff.
Okay.
And whatever way, I mean, if it's an email that works better for you, Tim, if it's a phone call, we could try to set up like a once a week. I don't know what time. I'd be happy to schedule it, or we could have one commissioner designated to be your contact person who would speak to you once a week. Whatever works. So if you want to think about that, and we can talk about it next week, maybe.
Oh, okay.
All right. Thank you. Mary,
Okay.
Vita, you had your hand raised.
Yes, I didn't know if Scott had his hand. Scott, did you want to?
I'll defer to you, Vita. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. You didn't know what I was going to say, though. So just a couple of things. I think I was a bit taken aback by the tone of the emails that came both from our tree warden and then as a follow-up to you, Miriam. And when I responded, you said in your second email that you wanted everybody to be flexible, and that you were being flexible and collaborative, and you expected us to be flexible and collaborative, and to maintain a calm and professional tone in communications. And I just want to say that works both ways. And I felt that there was more of an accusation and a grilling that happened that really felt inappropriate for the circumstances. So that's item number one. The second thing I wanted to mention, and thank you, Miriam, for for including the memorandum of understanding that was executed back in 2014. It's the first time I had seen that MOU, and my reaction to that MOU was that this is invalid, that this is a document that is essentially meaningless. It was signed by one person from the Conservation Commission at the time, and by Tim. It was called an MOU. It was not approved by the Select Board. So it really has no legal standing as far as I can see. So to refer back to this MOU, I think is a problem. And I think it calls into question, and moving back to kind of what you had suggested, and I think what we started to talk about before we got very distracted with Lot 032, of having a notice of intent and a standing order of conditions to deal with highway work. And I would like to explore, defaulting to the State Wetlands Protection Act, which I went back and researched. There are exclusions for highway work, and there are reasons for having exclusions. And it's, I think we need to take a look at that. So that's a discussion for another day, but I also just, and I will go back to town council about this MOU and back to the select board. But my reaction was to it that it's not, it has no standing, it has no legal standing.
Thank you. All right, well, we certainly can have those conversations and see what will work better. Happy to do that. All right, I see Neil Jackson is here. Mr. Jackson, hi.
Hi, I had trouble signing on. I apologize.
No problems. So we were waiting for you, obviously. So we're going to be continuing because we need to schedule a site visit.
Yeah.
And hopefully by April, the snow will have melted. And so we had an email exchange because I had been under the impression, I had asked you about who did the wetland delineation. I was under the impression Ward Smith had done it, but you emailed me that it was Heather Comey who did it actually.
Heather Comey, yes.
Okay. And is there a report?
Yes, I did send that in.
Okay, I didn't know if I saw that. Do you have it, Carrie? Did you see it?
I
email it?
also did not see it. I didn't see anything that was from or with the name of whoever did the delineation, just said Heather.
Heather Comey.
Yeah.
I sent in data sheets and photos.
Okay.
I
All
can
right.
resend
So
it. Honestly.
if I remember correctly, I did see those soil, but I was under the impression they were looking for a map, so that's why.
And was there a map or a
No,
report associated with that?
I mean, I did see the pictures that he sent, and I also saw the soil samples as well. So those were definitely there, and that was in the packet I scanned.
Okay, great. I'll make sure everybody gets that. It can't be. Is there a site plan with that delineation?
There is, yes.
In addition to what your design plan is?
No, but the design plan does have the delineation on there.
Okay. All right. Okay, is that sufficient for the commission? For when we do review this? That's okay, everybody can see it clearly enough. It's a little
I
hard.
think
to
so.
Okay. All right, so would 7 PM be okay to continue for April 13th?
It's okay with me, absolutely.
All right, so with your consent then, would somebody like to make a motion to continue to April 13th? At 7 PM?
Make a motion to continue this RDA to April 13th at 7 PM.
A second,
My second,
David,
Aye.
Sean, I, Harrington, Con, Scott, is that an I?
Yep.
I can,
Can you
Okay.
not hear me?
and now you can. Wilson?
Aye.
Okay, all right, let's move on. So we have a few minutes before 7:30 for the next. There is a draft letter that Beth circulated. Has everybody had a chance to look at that about the fire station? Yes,
yeah.
any comments or revisions?
Looked okay to me.
Yeah, no cons.
Okay, so well, let's, somebody want to make a motion to approve it?
Motion to approve the draft letter to the fire, about the fire.
It's a letter to the
Department.
select board.
The letter to the select board around the fire department.
Second,
Second,
Okay. David,
Aye.
Font, aye. Harrington,
I,
Khan,
Aye.
Wilson.
Hi,
Beth, would you be willing to like convert it into a PDF and send it to the select board and CC the Concom?
sure.
Thanks. All right, it is almost 7:30. Rita, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, could you just tell us what the nature of that letter is?
Beth, do you want to respond?
Yeah, it just has to do with making the town aware that there's resource areas on and abutting the fire station parcel. So future projects that are proposed for that, we just want to make sure that we have a discussion about a potential application for a wetland permit.
There's something that you think is planned, or you're just looking prospectively?
We've heard about potential investigations of the contamination at the site. So future monitoring wells that get installed, drilling, that kind of work.
Okay.
It could happen at the site.
Okay, good, thank you.
Sure.
All right, it's 7:30. So we have the public meeting for the request for determination of applicability for 56 North Roller Drive for a dock installation. And is Mr. Abdal here? Or someone representing him?
I don't believe anyone is coming for that because they sent that statement.
Okay. All right, so could you mute, please? There's some background. Thank you. All right, so I would propose that we continue with, since they've given consent for a continuation, and they agreed on April 13th. They didn't agree on a time, but I'm guessing 7:15 would be fine. Would somebody like to make a motion that we continue the public meeting to 7:15, 13th?
I'll make a motion to extend the public meeting for the Abdal dock installation to April 13th at 7:15.
Is there a second?
second,
David,
Aye.
Font, aye. Harrington,
I,
Aye.
Wilson. Wilson?
Aye.
And just as an FYI, I sent an email to the applicant because it looked like maybe there was an error, or maybe I'm not reading it correctly in the elevations on one of the site plans, where it looked like the lake level elevation did not jive with the elevations for the project by about 400 feet. One number said 835 and one said 435. So maybe I'm reading it wrong, but so there may be some update from them. Okay. And we've got 375 Locks Pond Road. I see Mr. Bernard or Mrs. Bernard are here. So thank you for improving the erosion controls, and I think I sent everybody the site visit form from Robin. Did I send it? I don't know if I did. It came in this afternoon. Probably didn't get a chance to send it out. Okay, so what happened was Robin and Mary went out and met with the Bernards to take a look at the erosion controls that they had installed. And the recommendation was that they put in erosion socks rather than the silt fence, because the silt fence was not trenched and was not going to be as effective as an erosion sock. And they very kindly did it right away. And it looks like everything is in order. Any discussion or questions?
Looked good to me.
All right. Did you have any questions?
I don't have any questions.
no,
I don't know if she hears me.
Oh,
It was
we
nice to
do.
see the improvements.
Yeah, no, we don't have any questions.
Okay, all right, so you're good, go. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
All right, okay, let's see what else we can take care of before we have our hearing at 8 o'clock. So I have on the agenda, just in case there were any updates on permitting for the Lake Wyola Dam. Have not heard any information updates about what the plans are for that. And I see Rita here. I don't know if Mark Rivers was coming tonight. Rita, was he coming? Do you know?
No, I don't believe he was coming.
Okay. All right. Do you have any updates you want to share?
Just, yeah, real briefly, we have been talking about the different elements that need to be taken care of in order to get the drawdown approved. And I think that the select board will be looking at the different steps that have to be taken, what can be done potentially in-house, what needs to be contracted, everything from the natural heritage to the Chapter 91 permit. There's lots of different pieces to this. And, we want to get the NOI done. But as I said, there are lots of pieces and potentially significant expense to the town if it has to be, if we have to hire consultants to do it. So we're just exploring the different pieces and what it's going to cost and how we can get it done efficiently and without a major expense to the town. Because in the past, it was done by volunteers. I don't think that's going to be possible this year.
Any other comments from the commission or questions? No. Okay. There had been a question that Mark Rivers had asked in email, asking if it was possible that the permit actually would allow, the current permit would actually allow for the fall drawdown to occur, because it's written in a way that makes it sound like the November drawdown was approved, even though the permit expires on October 18th of this year. And my understanding is that in general, permits don't approve work after the expiration date. So I'm not really sure if we have an answer for that. It is a confusing language in that order of conditions. And I suppose, if there was a very strict interpretation of the language in that permit, it would suggest that maybe the drawdown is approved through November, meaning until November 30th, but nothing after that, which would then lead the town to have no permit for raising the lake back up, which seems like a problem. So unless the town was ready to submit an NOI. So I don't know that I really have any answer, or if the commission has any thoughts, or if anybody else has any thoughts about it.
I'm hopeful that they'll get the NOI done and it'll
Yeah.
get resolved. I think everybody's working on it.
Yeah, great. It's good news. That would be my hope too. Okay. All right. So we have to go through and approve the conservation restriction draft that we received from Kestrel. Is Bridget here? Let's see, Bridget. Has everybody had a chance to read it through?
Yep.
Maybe we should have some discussion about it. I don't know if you had a chance in looking through the document to look through the comments from the reviewers from EEA. Did you see that? There were
No.
in the document, there's a whole back and forth between Bridget, the EA reviewer, and then an official from the US Forest Service about various language. And there were some changes that they, as a result of that discussion, some back and forth, there were some changes in the language that was required by the state. So the plan was for us to approve it tonight. And I don't know if you haven't had a chance, I can pull it up and we can go through some of it now, and then perhaps we can have more discussion if we need to later after the ANRAD hearing, if that's what you guys want. Want me to pull it up and show it in track changes? Show it in.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Jeremy?
Yeah, we should look at it. I didn't think the changes were that significant, but.
Oh,
we
they're
should look
not.
at it.
They're just really,
Yeah.
they're not. So
Right,
you
right,
guys
right.
see the document?
Yep.
I've got my screen minimized, so if somebody's got their hand raised, please let me know, okay? So John Goya is from EEA. And so there was some language. I don't know if you want me to scroll, I'll show you the comments. So he had a comment, and then Bridget revised Exhibit B to show the survey plan per his recommendations. And that was that. And then there was this question, there was a bunch of back and forth about what does the Forest Legacy Program, FLP, require in a CR? And because this CR is not funded by the Forest Legacy Program, my understanding is that some of this discussion wasn't relevant and kind of didn't result in any changes. Because the Forest Legacy Project only funded the town's purchase. It didn't mandate the conservation restriction that was mandated because we're using CPA funds. So as a result, this was the language in the document. So again, this is all, I think it's minor, and it seemed like it was more about these two different officials kind of getting up to speed with each other. Let me scroll down, see if there's any more changes. Again, there was like a question about the exceptions. And this is for Scott. Ron Scott is the Forest Service official, and John Goya, or Gaia, I don't know how to pronounce his name, basically said they were okay with it. They didn't need any changes. And so this is just a repeat of the same discussion, same comment, ditto. Nothing substantive. And then scrolling down. And this again was this, they changed the language because it made it sound like the CR was due to the requirements of the Forest Legacy Program funding, but it wasn't. It was tied to the CPA funding. So they changed that language to reflect that. And then Bridget likely just moved some content from the first, moved it around, but this is the grantor's receipt of the property right. Grantor and grantee agree that the conveyance of this conservation restriction gives rise to a real property right immediately vested in the grantee for the purpose of enforcing this conservation restriction, but does not entitle the grantee to any proceeds received by the grantor from sale. So the explanation is that trying to see if you can see this. Can you see the comments?
Mhm. Yeah.
Again, some some piece of punctuation was deleted. And here, amendments, no amendment shall be effective until blah, blah, blah. And again, taking out the language about the Forest Legacy Program because that was not mandating any of these changes. It wasn't due to the Forest Legacy funding. And then I think that's it. Wait, there's one more comment. All right. The Forest Service said the US could have what could be argued an interest if the property were to be sold. And Bridget said, leave it as is from their attorney. Know the agreement that if the land is sold, the Forest Service is repaid a portion of the lot is not a surety interest within the meaning of this section of the CR. The point of this section is to unearth any debts owed by the landowner for which the landowner used the land as collateral for repayment. The reason this is important is because the holder of the debt could decide to foreclose and it needs to be wiped out. Okay, so they clarified that. And that was the end of that discussion. And then please type names beneath signature lines. So that was done for the select board. And I think that's all there is. And then there was the change to Exhibit B to add the survey plan. So Exhibit A is a description of the premises. And there's the plan of land on Exhibit B that was added. And the town meeting vote. Okay. Any comments?
I just want to say, I think it's so great to have Kestrel around who can manage these kinds of things and are such experts in doing these kinds of things. And just that, you know, aside of all those kind of regulatory and picky comments, I did agree with the activities that were basically being allowed and the ones that were not, which is to me the core of the conservation restriction. So I think as long as the commission is, you know, in generally in agreement with those lists and parts to the CR, I think they look good.
I agree.
I agree. And just as a reminder, we can develop a management plan with specific regulations or rules for use that go beyond the conservation restrictions. So for example, if we want to add more specific rules, we can take that up. This does not preclude that.
Right.
All right, somebody want to make a motion to approve it?
I make a motion to approve the draft conservation restriction for the West Quabbin Woodlands Conservation Area.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, David,
Aye.
aye, Harrington,
I,
Aye.
Wilson.
Aye.
Now, I have a question because I don't really know. This has to get recorded. It has to get signed and notarized by the select board. So I think I hand this, I will take out the comments, clean it up and send it to the select board. And then will they take care of the recording? Is that how it works? Rita?
A good question. I haven't had any experience with this before, but I guess my question was, so do you need do we need to put this on the agenda for Tuesday night's meeting to accept the conservation restriction? I don't, maybe Beth can answer that. Beth Goodman.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Beth.
Anybody.
Beth, do you know how this works? You're muted.
Blocking my unmute button was blocked by an explanation of how to unmute. Anyway, yes, there should be a vote And however, I don't know, whatever meeting you want to put it on, there has to be a vote and then it has to be recorded. I haven't reviewed this CR. Doesn't it have to also, who else is it holding it? Is it just between the Concom, the landowner and the town and not EEOEA?
It's between Kestrel Land Trust and the Conservation Commission or the town.
Okay. And
So,
not the state at all. It's not like a,
oh, but EEA has reviewed it. So we were just going over, this has been approved. The final draft was approved by EEA. So.
okay,
This is
but
already.
they don't sign it? Does the
Um,
director have to sign? I didn't see the draft. Usually there's a place where they sign too.
Let me look. That's a good question. I'll open
But
up. that.
yes, so the selectmen vote and they sign. And then usually the executive office signs, and when you get all the signatures, wet signatures, and some of them notarized, you have to have at least one notarized, then it can be recorded.
I'm trying to open it up, guys. It's not showing up on my list, but so I'm not going to screen share it. Let me just look at it and I'll tell
You
you.
can verify that later, but that's usually the process for
And
a
you're
seal.
probably right that there's a spot for them. Just scrolling down to see who signs what. So there is a spot for the
It's usually a
okay.
separate page, right?
Yeah, so there's the select
Hard,
board
right?
acceptance of the grant. So it looks like Kestrel.
Landowner signs.
And I do not see a place. Oh, and there is a place for the secretary to sign
Okay,
it.
good.
So all three. So I guess the select board can sign, or accept it and sign it and then forward it on to Kestrel. And then,
So you don't have to have one paper copy, right? Anybody can get a digital copy, print out their page, sign their page, notarize, and then somebody compiles all the original signatures.
okay. All right. So I guess what I would ask the select board is to decide whether who's going to do that, whether you need the Conservation Commission to collect those and to do the recording, or whether it can be done at the town hall level.
Miriam, if you're okay, I can find out. I will ask. I think, for starters, we can, as I said, we can put this on the agenda for Tuesday night, get it signed, and then by then we'll have an answer for you in terms of how the recording happens. Okay.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Let's see if there's anything else. So why don't we, before we have the hearing then, since Mark is not going to be here tonight, let's talk about the sign. I know Penny is here from the Open Space Committee. So LWAC would like to put up better signage down at the boat launch because there's concerns that motor boaters who are not familiar with the town's regulations are not following the safety rules, including only going in a counterclockwise direction and staying under 30 miles per hour. And so there is a kiosk which has been used for putting up posts about regulations for that conservation area. But what they are proposing to do is put a much larger sign that would be 18 inches by 24 inches and would be affixed to the side of the kiosk, off the side, so that it would be very visible if you were loading a boat onto the boat ramp. And they would like approval of this. And because I understand that there have been previous discussions between Open Space and the Concom and LWAC about signage in that parking area, I wanted to include Penny and give Open Space an opportunity to weigh in before we approve anything. So Penny, do you want to?
Sure. So actually, Open Space hasn't been actively involved in this. There wasn't an active Open Space Committee. The kiosk came about while I was on the commission, and it was installed because the goal was to reduce all the visual clutter that had accumulated in the parking area close to where the boat launch is. There were signs on trees and signs on posts and signs all over the place. So there was an agreement between LWAC and the Conservation Commission at the time to install a kiosk and to contain all of the information that pertained to the Lake Wayla / Southbrook Conservation Area and the lake within that one space. And I have to say, I'm a little hesitant to start allowing or encouraging things to move beyond that, because I think in a few years, you're going to have things in the kiosk and again on the trees and on posts, et cetera. So, you know, it's really, as the managers of the site, the Conservation Commission is the group that decides on this. But I would urge you to think long and hard about how you want to proceed with this, just because I think you're setting a precedent here. So that is my 2 cents. You know, if this pertains specifically to boaters, perhaps the recommendation, rather than attaching yet another thing to the kiosk, which has already happened, would be to put in one post with that sign right down at the water's edge for the boat launch. That might be the better solution rather than sticking another sign onto the kiosk. But you guys get to decide on that.
Mary.
So, I mean, they did discuss that option and went back to putting it on the kiosk because that had been the previous agreement. I do think the sign is necessary. There's constant ongoing issues with those 2 things. The kiosk is nice, but you got to read through everything. So, I mean, I do think putting those 2 things is going to be important for safety on the lake. And they've discussed this at multiple meetings at LWAC. And the only reason they didn't go for a separate sign was because of the agreement that we would try to keep the sign and the kiosk and everything in one place. You know, they weren't objecting to having a separate sign. They were trying to keep with the spirit of the agreement.
Thanks. Tracy?
Hi. Yeah, I would agree with Penny. I think that keeping anything to do with Southbrook Conservation Land under the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission rather than allowing it to sort of get spread through other committees. In the past, LWA has had, you know, they had a safety committee and were putting up safety cards that violated the actual rules and bylaws on the way that the traffic, not the traffic, but yeah, well, yeah, the traffic and the swimmers and the boaters and the kayakers and the canoers, that was not the actual law. And that went on for years, that was up and being spread around the lake. And people were being sort of harassed if they were out beyond 150 feet in their kayak or canoe, because the boaters were saying that the rule was that only the speedboats could be out there, which is actually not the law. So I think it's really important that it keep, you know, with the Conservation Commission, so that what, you know, the actual rules are stay that way. In addition, I would say, based on feedback from many people that I know around the lake, because I live over here, that the violators of this speed are generally people who live on the lake, not people coming in from outside. So I think it would be a really good idea to look at getting some the town boat, speedboat that the police have, getting that out on the water, as opposed to just sort of focusing on outsiders. It's predominantly insiders that are speeding.
Well, and that's not really our jurisdiction. But I think my feeling is I really appreciate the desire to not have more sign posts up and the desire to attach this to the kiosk. I feel like it might be more effective. It was a freestanding sign over by the boat launch, so the boats would see it as they were going onto the boat launch. So I don't want to have a repeat of the conditions that there used to be, but I think that making one sign for safety reasons seems okay to me. I think my preference would be to have it be a freestanding sign over by the boat launch rather than on the kiosk.
So I'd like to make a motion that we approve a freestanding sign as submitted by LWAC.
I agree. Second.
Any discussion more about this? Do we need to get LWAC to agree to that, or we think they'll agree to
They
that?
really, if they have our agreement, then they're moving forward. They just didn't want to move forward without.
Okay.
It's really, if Conservation Commission approves it, they'll implement it.
All right, so, so the language as proposed, but in a freestanding sign. All right,
Yes.
all right. So
wait.
David, what?
Can I just, wait, did we actually see the language? I'm not sure I saw the language.
I think I forwarded it to everybody at one point. Well, I couldn't find it today. All I know is that it said that it would basically restating two parts that are in the town bylaw for the lake, which is
Correct.
boats shall not go over 30 miles per hour from dawn to dusk, and boats shall only move in a counterclockwise direction. I think is sort of what it says roughly. Is that right? Sound right?
Yes. Yeah.
So those two things.
So our
May I ask a question for clarification? You said 30 miles an hour from dawn to dusk. Does that mean no boats the rest of the time, or the rules are?
It's not really clear, is it? Like, could it be over 30 miles per hour after dusk?
Or are there no boats on the lake?
There's
after
no,
this
there's
time?
no boats on the lake after that time.
Is that?
It doesn't
well, that-
say that though.
Perhaps that should be stated as well. If you're aiming this at out of towners.
Yeah, I think, I think they felt that the language that's on the sign would address that.
Okay, well,
I mean, I'll certainly bring it and discuss it, ask the question again when I go back, since I'm the rep to the committee.
We want to make a recommendation. Commissioners to Mary.
Can
I think stating what's in the bylaws is what they went with, so that it was consistent. Because everybody could argue it one way or the other. What does it mean? It was taken, I think we went back to take it right out of what the bylaws said.
Okay. Scott, did you want to say something?
I just had a question. I'm not following our jurisdiction or tie to the language of how boats move around the lake.
We don't,
why we're-
we don't have any jurisdiction about those, that we just have jurisdiction over
It's in,
what
yeah.
signs get put up.
It's
So
in
I
the
would say,
bylaws.
I'm good, right, but not with our authority. I mean, I'm good putting the sign up, but I would defer to those who have the authority to, whatever the sign is instructing people to do, that part of the bylaw, Mary, that you're referring to, I'm not sure that that's for the Concom to discuss here.
Yeah, I guess, and just to add to that, I feel like our jurisdiction really is what does the sign look like? You know, where's it gonna go and what does it look like? And it would kind of be good, I guess, if LWAC would actually have some kind of a PDF of the actual final thing to show us, and then we could say, yeah, that looks good, and we approve this location.
They did send a draft PDF. I don't know.
don't think-
I don't think I saw it, but
I
that could be
don't,
just.
I don't, I think it was just in an email. I don't know if I had actually, if Mary, if, could you see if there is a PDF, and if there isn't, maybe ask them if they could send it to us.
Yeah, I was pretty sure that they mocked it up already, but
Okay. I couldn't find it. So if you can send it back to us, send it to everybody, that'd be great. But we've already approved the sign. We're approving the sign being put up on a separate post. So I don't think we need to go back and revisit that.
Correct. Okay.
Okay, I think we need to move on. I know that some people have their hands raised, but
Well, can we finish? Oh, yeah, you're gonna call the vote. I'm sorry.
oh, I didn't call the vote. Right, David,
I,
I, Con,
Aye.
Harrington,
I,
Wilson.
Aye.
Great. All right, so we're gonna move on to open the public hearing for the ANRAD for 66 Lake Drive for lot 032. This, I want to just make a couple of comments just to introduce the process for tonight. Want to make sure we have an orderly and efficient meeting, and that the commissioners have an opportunity to get any questions answered that they might have. And we value public participation, and will allow as much comment as is possible, but we will see how the evening goes, but my goal is to limit the comments to no more than 30 minutes. So a previous policy that we had approved for other ANRADs and for other public hearings is to ask the public to make their comments as concise as possible, and keep them within 2 minutes. And that we will only allow one comment per individual, unless time allows. And please wait to be recognized by the chair. And please don't ask follow-up questions unless you're recognized by the chair. So the process will be that we'll get an update from the applicants and we'll hear from our consultants, and then the commissioners will have an opportunity to ask questions, and then the public will be allowed an opportunity to make comments. Just to familiarize everybody, if anybody's new to this is an abbreviated notice of resource area delineation that we are reviewing tonight. This is not a project or a work being proposed. What is being reviewed is a wetland delineation. There's been a long, lengthy process of the town's consultants and the Concom's consultants going out and doing multiple site visits and reviewing the wetland lines on this property and then mapping them. And our task is to approve those wetland lines and approve the map as submitted in the final site plan. So our last hearing, which was what, was it December or was it February? I can't remember. It was February, I think, right? When did we meet last, the last hearing for this? It's all blurring to me. It was a while ago. Mary Ann, when was it?
So when we actually talked about it, other than continuing it, was December.
It was
That
December.
was December 8th, I believe.
8th. That's why I'm thinking. So it's been a couple of months, 3 months. And
Okay.
now the applicants have revised the site plan, and we had agreed in theory that we all had reached a consensus at the last public hearing. So we will not be relitigating decisions or agreements that we've already made or information that we've already reviewed, because we want to be efficient. So with that said, and if anybody from the public has any questions about acronyms or abbreviations, there is a list of acronyms and abbreviations on our town website under our applications subpage if you need some translation. Okay, so is tonight we have April. Is April Dorosky here? I don't see her. Hi, April, welcome. And we have Emily, April is from Fuss and O'Neill, and she is the wetland scientist working for the town. And then the Conservation Commission has hired Emily Stockman to be our third-party reviewer and consultant, who is also reviewing the project for us. So welcome, Emily. And Beth Goodman is here tonight, who is counsel for the Conservation Commission. I believe Gregor McGregor is here representing the town as counsel. Welcome. So how would you like to start? April, do you want to just get us up to date with where the status is of the submittal?
Yeah, sure. And thank you for having us tonight. This has been a process, and I'm excited to be here tonight. Since our last meeting, we have had the wetland flag location surveyed, and updated the locations to provide a accurate map, and provided that supplemental information, including the updated wetland report with the surveyed flag locations on February 9th. And that is essentially the update for tonight. So we are respectfully requesting the final action and the issuance of the order.
One of the things that Emily Stockman and I discussed, and I just wanted to share this with the commission because she drafted the language for our order, or the ORAD, which is the Order of Resource Area Delineation, which is the order that we produce as a result of an NRAD. We produce an ORAD where we approve wetland lines, and by consensus and agreement with the applicant, there is a portion of BVW3 that is not being delineated or approved. And so we're going to make that clear in the ORAD findings, what we're approving and not approving. But it also means that the buffer zone line for BVW3 is not being approved tonight in that area because we don't know where the boundaries of the resource area are. And I thought we should maybe have Emily explain what that means and how, what would the methodology would be for defining that line in the future, if it needs to be defined.
Certainly, Miriam, I'm happy to speak to that. As you just summarized, during the peer review process and as reflected on the final plans produced by Fuss and O'Neill, there's a portion of BVW3 where the boundary has not been formally established, and that's due to the presence of fill within that area. And sometimes during an initial assessment and delineation, a scientist can obtain the requisite data to establish a boundary of a filled wetland. However, there are also times where the fill is substantial enough, greater than say 3 or 4 feet, where the boundary cannot be established during the general normal practices. So when that is the case, it is a common practice that either through a notice of intent procedure or responding to an enforcement order, that the landowner would retain the services of their consultant scientist to prepare a procedure, a plan, a restoration action to present before the commission seeking approval. Typically, what we see is restoration and boundary determination coinciding at the same time. So as you're out there in the field, removing the fill, starting at the edge of the wetland and working your way back, you're using equipment in that sensitive area as needed to remove the depth of that fill. And then as the underlying soils are exposed, you're evaluating those to determine whether they're hydric or wetland, or if you've removed enough fill that you can document an upland or non-hydric soil. So that's just sort of a general sense of the process. It's not a process that's under review right now as part of the ANRAD. The applicant has clearly stated on their final plans of record that that boundary has not been determined, and therefore they're not seeking approval at this time for that portion of the boundary. And it's my opinion that the subsequent draft ORAD reiterates that there is an open boundary there that remains to be determined.
The delineation for a future project could happen at the same time as the restoration.
From a practical standpoint, that has been my experience, because in order to remove the amount of fill necessary to examine those underlying soils while you're out there. You can continue your exploration and remove that unpermitted fill from the wetland. A second procedure that I have also seen is a simple exploration through trenching, where rather than remove all the fill, you go out there and you do some transects and trenching to sort of estimate to determine the boundaries within those transects. But then that requires one to come back at a later date and remove the rest of the fill. So, with restoration, we always want to be cognizant of the fact that these are protected and delicate ecosystems, and we don't want to be spending more time in them than necessary. So it's typically expedited that the restoration and the boundary determination are happening at the same time.
Okay, thank you. I guess one of my questions had been, and I was that it is a little confusing on the site plan that there's a buffer zone line that is not really a buffer zone line. It's really a provisional buffer zone line around BVW3, because you can't really have a buffer zone line if you don't know where the resource area line is. And there isn't any notation on the site plan calling that out, or, I don't know, it could have been a different color, or there could have been, a label or a notation saying this is a provisional line, or this has yet to be determined or verified. I'm wondering, April, if you could comment on that.
Sure, I can. Would you mind if I just shared my screen?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Yes. Okay, can everyone see the map I have, figure 232? The area that we are discussing where there's no boundary for the wetland is between this wetland flag 3A 114 and 115 demarcated there. The buffer zone is drawn around this wetland 3. The idea was that there is an area where there's potential fill within this wetland, and that because of the forested area and the vegetation being more mature, 30 feet or so away from it, even if the BVW extended to the east, this buffer zone from this lower portion of the BVW would encompass any extension of the BVW. But I do understand what you are saying. That is the idea of why the buffer zone is surrounding the entire BVW3.
Yeah, I think I would have preferred having some note, even if it was just a text box saying that this, that buffer zone is not verified. But we're gonna make note of it in our ORAD. It just, when people look at site plans, we don't want to have any misunderstanding about that. But
Right.
I don't think at this point, I'm gonna ask, unless the commission feels strongly about it, I don't know that I would ask you to come back and revise it. I've just wanted to comment on it.
I think just to bring a note for it, so as they move forward with site plans and architects and things, that they understand what that means. I don't think we need to do anything else with it. I just think that that's an FYI for people on the committee as they go forward.
Okay. All right. So are there any more comments that April you would like to make, or Emily, is there any more comments that we should?
No additional comments for me.
And commissioners, do you have any questions? I see somebody from the public has their hand raised, but before I call them, I want to make sure you've had a chance. If you have any more questions.
No, I'm
Nope.
okay.
No.
I'm good. Thanks,
Le-
Marion.
Did you have a comment, Lachonic?
Yeah, yes, I do. Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Can you hear me?
yes.
Yes.
Great. I'm commenting as a 30-year resident of the town and having seen this entire property being unfortunately trashed over the years. And my desire is to have as much of the property restored as possible, especially any illegal dumping in the wetlands. To that end, I'm going to read some excerpts very quickly from 4 reports that are on the Conservation Commission website. And I certainly would like the comments of April and Mr. McGregor and Beth and Emily after I quote these excerpts. This is from the Stockman report of November 22nd, 2022. Unpermitted fill and dumping within the protected BVW is a violation of the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act. It is our understanding that Shutesbury Conservation Commission is currently working with the landowner to address the violation. A BVW restoration plan is anticipated. The next report is the F. Fussin O'Neill report on behalf of the town, same date. The applicant is respectfully requesting to allow the assessment of the BVW between 3A114 and 3A115 to occur during restoration efforts. Stockman report, December 1. The boundary of 3A114 and 3A115 will be determined during the restoration efforts. And therefore, this portion of the BVW boundary will be excluded from the ANRAD. Fussin O'Neill. Stockman Associates recommends the commission include findings with the ORAD to clearly address any special circumstances such as excluded boundaries and forthcoming restoration. So I would like to know when this restoration is going to take place, and I certainly would like to see it take place sooner than later, and certainly before the construction of the library. So I would love to hear the responses from town officials and the attorneys and consultants who are here tonight. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you for your comment, Les. I do want to say that we're not reviewing the restoration work tonight. That's not part of the public hearing process. There's no work being proposed at this point, and we have no application for any work before us. So we're not in a position to opine about this or to deliberate because it's premature for us to do so at this time. So I suspect that perhaps this would be something, unless somebody wants to comment, I don't want to prevent anybody from making a statement if they want to, but I'm not sure that it's appropriate for the commission to be weighing in about this. Okay. Well, I don't see any responses. So I think we're going to move on. And the other thing I just wanted to call out, because this may be a little unfamiliar language for Fussin O'Neill and for the town officials, but in our order of resource area delineation, we will be commenting on a resource area that is not protected under the Wetland Protection Act, but is protected under our bylaw. Because that was not delineated, it will not be part of the ORAD at this time. And we are in the process of overhauling our bylaw regulations in order to better define what our standards are going to be for that resource area in the future, for future projects. Okay, are there any more comments from anybody before we move on? No. Okay, all right. Do we have enough information to close the public hearing?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Somebody want to make a motion to close the public hearing?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing on 66 Leverett Road, lot 033.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Emily, you have your hand raised.
Miriam, just sort of, I think a clarifying question for Beth, since she's here tonight, and for the benefit of the commission and those in attendance. It's my understanding that once the hearing is closed, that there's no further discussion with the public. So the deliberation will begin amongst the Conservation Commission, but if you were looking to have any additional discussion on any draft materials, that the hearing should remain open. But I'll let Beth correct me if I'm wrong.
No, in my understanding, that's why you close a public hearing.
Okay.
The public comment period is done, then the commission can vote to close the public hearing, and then they're allowed to deliberate, which they must do in a public meeting. And that's the process. So yeah, you don't close the public hearing if you're expecting someone to react or comment. And lots of times boards and commissions go back and say, wait, I want to clarify this point or that point. And you know, that happens, but it's really not right. The right way is you get all your questions answered during the public hearing comment period. And then when you close, it's just your commission deliberating on whether you have, you know, conditions or writing or other things that you want to do, process.
Yeah.
Vernal commission.
That now that you're talking, I have a couple questions for you. And should I be asking you these questions while we're still in the public hearing, or can we ask you during our deliberation?
No, you should ask now, I think, even though I'm your consultant. I mean,
so since we are issuing this ORAD under both the Wetland Protection Act regulations and also the regulations jurisdiction associated with our local wetland bylaw, our ORAD findings will spell that out, that it is being issued under both. But the WPA Form B is for the Wetland Protection Act. And my thought had been that we should take an alternative Form B to issue the ORAD under the bylaw. So I've taken Form B and edited it to take out some of the content that is very specific to the state law, and am going to propose that we use that if you think it's advisable, Beth. We can review it now before we close the public hearing, if that makes sense, to make sure that you think that the way in which it was edited is appropriate.
yeah, I think that would be good, because you might want to ask something or somebody else might want to comment on it. And so if you want to have it publicly discussed, I would do it now. Doesn't mean that you're voting on whether to use it or not. We're just discussing this draft.
Okay. And I think at this point,
else has their hand up too.
Yeah, and I think at this point, the public comment period is over unless you have a very, very brief comment, Mary Lou. Did you have-
My name is Mary Lou Conca, and my question, my concern is that the town knows about the PFAS that, you know, that were found in a well that abuts the lot 032. So, you know, I'm a lay person. I know what you all are doing.
Mary Lou, I'm going to cut you off. This isn't relevant to this public hearing. So we're only here to talk about the resource area delineation. We're not here to talk about anything else. So I'm
Okay.
Okay. Not appropriate for this discussion. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
I am gonna
So you want to talk about your draft?
yes, I am gonna, let me pull up the form. Okay, I think this is it. All right. Let me get it so I can see. I'm sorry, I got muted somehow. Can people see this?
Yes.
Okay. So this is basically the Form 4B which the Wetland Protection Act, Form B. But as you can see, I've changed the header so that it is under our bylaw. But basically, I took all the content that was from the draft that Emily drafted for us. So Emily, please, if you see something, please say something. So here's the content. I'm going to scroll down. Nothing here is really different from Form B, from the state form. Except that the latitude looks weird in here. It's blank. So I guess I would need to add that. I'm gonna just highlight that. So here is the most recent site plan. We would be issuing it tomorrow. And then under order of delineation, it would be modified. And I checked off both 1 and 2 because there's isolated vegetated wetlands that were also part of this delineation. Not just BBW, and because there's also delineation of buffer zone. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, so none of this is really earth shaking. It's all the same. The only difference is that I changed the wording in here to take out the reference to the state law and made the reference to our bylaw and its regulations.
Okay.
And then I took out the whole section about appeals because that's relevant for the appeal to DEP. There is no appeal to DEP under the bylaw. There is an appeal process potentially going to what, Superior Court? Is that correct? Do we need to have that in this order? That we're specifying what the appeal process is? Beth, I can't hear you. You're muted.
It might be useful to state that how long they have to appeal. I don't really know. Is it 60 days or? There is a right of
I
appeal.
couldn't find any language in the bylaw about the appeal process.
Well, I think the appeal from a finding under a local bylaw, Gregor's here, we can ask him, is writ of certiorari.
Close
And
enough. Close enough. The deadline is 60 days from the
It
vote
is 60. Okay,
to
good.
sue in Superior Court under certiorari, which is just as a fancy Latin word meaning review on a certified record.
Good.
Okay,
So-
let's see. I'm typing as
But-
we speak.
But having said that, you don't have to mention the appeal to DEP in 10 business days, and you don't have to mention the 60 days for certiorari because they apply anyway. If you do mention it, it's just a favor. They
Yeah,
apply
so
anyway.
it was just to give notice to people under DEP. So you can leave it off on this.
All right, all right.
But it doesn't
So-
say how to appeal. It doesn't say anything wrong about the appeal.
Right, right. So I've taken that all out. And then I have just the signatures that it's good for 3 years. And the date.
It says attached special conditions. Do you have them? Are they separate for
Fine.
this?
Yeah, I haven't opened those up yet. Yes, I
Okay,
do
but
have.
they're separate ones for your bylaw.
Well, I'm using one document, but it breaks it down by bylaw and it's all in one document, but it's broken down in 2 sections. I'll show it to you in a second. So, hand delivery tomorrow. So it would expire on 3/10/2026. Is that correct?
Unless you provided otherwise, yes.
Okay. And then I didn't, there's no more to it because the last 2 pages of Form 4B are for the appeal process if you're seeking a superseding order. Right?
Yes.
So, so my thought is that we can use this in the future for ORADs as well, just for clarity and consistency.
You got a hand up?
Yeah, Gregory, you have your hand raised.
No, I meant to lower it.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, let me pull up now. Were there any comments from the commission about this?
No, that one looks good.
Okay,
So we're submitting 2 basically.
we'd be submitting 2 ORADs, right? Would be 2 documents. 2 Form 4Bs and 2 sets of the findings, even though the findings are kind of a combined. So let me pull up the draft of the findings. And make sure I've got the right draft because we changed it a couple times. All right, let me screen share this. All right. All right, everybody see it?
Yep.
Okay, so I added this language today because it wasn't in saying this order is hereby issued pursuant to our jurisdiction, to the jurisdiction over resource areas as defined by the Wetland Protection Act, the bylaw, the regulations of the act, and our bylaw and its regulations. Is that good?
Yep.
All right, and then the Conservation Commission approves the boundaries of bordering vegetated wetlands depicted on these site plans. 2, 3, the commission does not approve any protected resource area boundaries located outside of the depicted ANRAD review area boundary on the final site plans. Now, I have a question. I don't know, and this is for Emily. I don't know that there's anything in here saying that we treat the buffer zone as a protected resource, that we consider that a resource.
Miriam, I believe that's later on in the document where it speaks to findings specific to the bylaw.
Okay.
Page.
All right, we'll get down there. Okay, thank you. I just didn't remember. Okay. We do not approve any resource area boundaries outside of the property and the depicted review area. So there are parts of this parcel that were not part of this ANRAD application. The following findings concern jurisdictional areas protected by both the act and the bylaw. The commission approves the boundary of 100-foot buffer zones within the ANRAD review area, including the no contest buffer zone boundaries, but excluding the buffer zone boundary associated with the BVW boundary between flags 3A114 and 115. And then here's some added language that Emily gave us. The BVW boundary between these two flags has not been established, reviewed, and approved. Therefore, the associated buffer zone boundary has not been established, reviewed, and approved. Any buffer zone for this resource area depicted on the site plan is not approved. Is that clear? The commission approves BVW1 flags. The commission approves the boundary of the BVW2 flags. And the commission finds that the BVW2 has been impacted by unauthorized fill. And then we find, now Emily made the recommendation of just putting this in, finding that BVW2 needs to be restored. We're not issuing an enforcement order. We're not ordering the work. There's no deadline for this. We're just making this as a finding. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Beth, do you have any comments? Beth Goodman?
Beth Goodman. No, I think I've reviewed this part
Okay.
of the findings.
Okay, and then again, the same kind of language for BVW3, except for that exclusion area that's not being approved. There's fill, needs to be restored. And we find that the isolated wetlands do not meet the definition for isolated land subject to flooding, which would protect them under the act. And then under 5, now we're going into what is only jurisdictional under the bylaw. The following jurisdictional areas we are determining. So we approve the boundary. So she basically goes through the same language around the boundary of the 100-foot buffer zone and the no contest zone and excluding that BVW. Now, the commission finds that the isolated wetlands do not meet the size criteria for protection as isolated wetlands under our bylaw. Actually, it's under our bylaw regulations. Should I say that? because that could change in the future, with future revisions of the regulations. And then this is that language, and I wanted to have a conversation with the commission. Subsurface lakes, rivers, ponds, and streams are protected as resource areas under the bylaw. I mean, my feeling is, I understand why Emily has it written, because the grammar is weird in the bylaw. But my own impression is that the intention was that it was only referencing streams, not subsurface ponds. Do we still need to do this?
I think it makes it clearer.
I think Emily took that right out of the bylaw, right?
I did. It's taken right out. This is Emily speaking, if I may. Sorry.
Yeah.
I took it right out of the bylaw, and this has come up, I think, with other ORADs in town. And I do understand that the commission is working towards addressing this aspect of the bylaw and the regulations. But at this point, that's the language right out of that document.
Yeah, what it says is any lake, river, pond, or stream, and then in parentheses, whether surface or subsurface. So it isn't making it clear that the surface or subsurface qualifier applies to all four of those things or just streams. My sense is that from our conversations in the past is that we will promulgate regulations that define this more clearly. But it's a grammatical interpretation, really. It's an interpretation of the sentence in the bylaw.
I think it's fine.
Well, but as you're saying, I think we're working on looking at subsurface streams only, though. We haven't really spent time or talked at all about looking at the other things. So I guess my interpretation was that it always just meant streams. I didn't think it meant rivers, lakes, and ponds.
I didn't either.
So maybe I just think maybe here we just talk about streams, because that's really all that we've been trying to sort of address in our other work.
Well, that was my thought, because it just, I mean, if you were an applicant, you'd go like, oh, what does that mean? And what do I have to do to delineate that in order to use my property? So I just feel like it's adding a layer of confusion that perhaps we could eliminate by making a decision about how we are interpreting the grammar of that sentence.
Couldn't you just say that if it's not shown on the site plan as a resource area, it hasn't been approved?
Well, we wanted to make it clear that it wasn't approved because it wasn't delineated. Because we have,
if it isn't on this plan, if it doesn't show on these site plans, we didn't approve it. Say that. Whatever the resource area is, if it isn't shown on these plans, we didn't approve it. These plans show what we've approved.
Mm-hmm. I think we had wanted, this is really a throwback, Beth, to some other ANRADs that we reviewed for much larger, significant projects, for some solar projects in town, were really large parcels where we really wanted to be very clear to the applicants that because there could be some cumulative impacts, that they need to understand that they might have to do some further investigations at a later date. So that's why we had a long discussion, a public hearing last year with our town council about this, and this was based on her recommendation. So I'm kind of inclined not to take it out completely, though I'm wondering if we could get rid of the ponds, rivers, or the ponds and lakes part of it.
You mean subsurface pond, lakes?
Well, yeah, you could say subsurface rivers and streams are a protected resource.
That's fine if that's the interpretation.
Because we had, I mean, if that or We haven't defined it yet. We haven't done the regulatory work yet. We could just leave it like this and then, we'll do the regulatory work as soon as we can. So that we can get some regulations in place for applicants.
Nothing in your order is going to affect your jurisdiction in the bylaw, so it doesn't really matter.
Okay.
It only
All right.
affects what you're finding on this site.
Yeah, okay, so we'll just leave it as is then. Then it says the areas, I gotta move. Can't see, read. The areas within 100 feet of these resource areas are protected as a resource. The boundaries of areas within 100 feet of subsurface streams have not been delineated. It doesn't say here that the buffer zone is a protected resource anywhere in here.
Well,
It
the
it
first
does,
bullet.
it's under the first, it's the last sentence in the first paragraph, I believe. Buffer zones are protected as resource areas under the bylaw.
Okay, how about if I just break that down so it doesn't get lost? How's that? Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay. A southeasterly portion of the ANRAD review area is located within outstanding resource area of Quabbin Reservoir Public Watershed. Okay. If a notice of intent is required for work within the ANRAD review area, the applicant must submit a site plan depicting all jurisdictional resource area boundaries under the bylaw, those approved under this ORAD and those present but not reviewed and approved under this ORAD. So. All right. Any other comments or revisions from the commission?
No,
Okay.
Nope.
Right, so do we now feel like we're ready to close the public hearing?
Yeah.
All right, and,
Motion to close the public hearing?
okay, second,
Second,
okay, David,
Aye.
Font, I, Harrington,
I,
Aye.
Wilson.
aye.
Okay. So, are we in agreement now with what we've already reviewed? Do we need any further deliberation?
It looks good to me.
Yeah, looks good to me.
Okay, everybody else feel that way? All right. Do I have everyone's permission to sign digitally for them?
yes,
Yes.
Okay,
You're gonna take a vote though, right?
we are gonna take a vote. For signing digitally?
No, just for the whole.
Oh, yeah,
approval.
no, we're gonna do that.
Like,
So,
wait, you're kind of signing, but we haven't approved it
no,
yet.
no, no. So what I would like is somebody to propose a motion to issue the ORAD as drafted under both the Wetland Protection Act and under the bylaw.
So I'll make that motion.
Want to just say that, make the motion.
Make the motion to approve the ORAD under both sets of bylaws. For the 66 Leverett Road, Lotto 32.
So it's under the
Under this-
Wetland Protection Act.
Under the Wetland Protection Act and the Shutesbury Wetland Protection bylaws.
Do we have a second?
I'll get the wording right yet.
Yeah,
I second.
okay. David,
Aye.
Font, I. Harrington,
I,
Khan,
Aye.
Wilson.
Aye.
Okay.
Yay.
Yay.
Celebration.
So let me pull up my agenda, see where we are with all of this. Hang on one sec. All right, so I thought I would just give the commission an update on the permitting process for Lotto 32 for the new library. Last week, I was contacted by the library director, who shared with me some concerns about how to approach developing a notice of intent for the cleanup of BVW3. And what she shared was that the town was looking to develop a scope for this and hire a consultant, but that they were unclear about what was required or needed for that cleanup. and was looking for some clarity or guidance from the commission. And what I shared, and we can talk about that tonight as well, was that usually the process would be that the town would have a consultant who would do the investigation or propose the investigation that kind of Emily spelled out during the public hearing tonight. And then we would review that and comment on it at that stage based on what feedback we got from their consultant, and if we hired our own consultant, that would be kind of the way the process usually works. But again, our preference had been to see this bundled with the library notice of intent as a mitigation project. And you know, I encouraged her to talk with their consultants about what mitigation projects might look like, because in my understanding is that a mitigation project may be mandatory, may be required, because there's going to be impacts on resource areas and buffer zones for the library project, and that doing it all as one bundled notice of intent might actually save the town some time and money, because we're going to have to be delineating the BVW 3 boundary if they're going to be doing any work in its vicinity. It's my understanding. So did I get that straight? Does that kind of make sense to, I guess, like Emily and the commission and Mary Ann? Yeah.
I don't know how to leave the little hand thing. Oh, there
Oh,
it is.
you can go ahead, Beth.
Thank you. I raised my real hand. I just think that with the way Emily described, I just wanted to go into more depth about the way Emily described the restoration of the wetland that had been filled. And my understanding would be that the mobilization costs, the site costs, can be reduced, because if you have to have equipment out there to start doing work, you're building a foundation, you have a project, you file a notice of intent for the project work, and it can also include the removal of that fill. That's what I thought Emily was describing, that it could be done as part of a notice of intent for the project. And that's all I wanted to comment on, that if it's done separately, you have a separate day when you have to get the, vehicles out there. And I mean, maybe you're using town vehicles, but to have all the consultants there and to have work done, you might as well also have this restoration work done, removing the fill until you find the boundaries of wetland 3. And if I'm saying that wrong, Emily, jump in, but that was my understanding of why one notice of intent to deal with the wetland that's filled and also deal with the project. It makes efficiency sense. And that way you file one document and you also do the work with vehicles that are on the site.
Miriam, can I follow up?
Please do.
Yeah, thank you for that opportunity to clarify. So my intent in my summary was twofold. One was just to speak procedurally in regards to how filled wetland can be restored. And so you essentially have two options, because you're working in the resource area proper. The work will require either a notice of intent, or there's an enforcement order issued and the work is done under the responding restoration plan. So those are your two procedural avenues for getting the work done. In regards to expediting the process, typically we see that the boundary is established at the same time as the restoration. And that is because of the mobilization and the equipment necessary. So rather than just go in there with equipment and take some occasional, test pits, try to work your way through a boundary, it's often more practical to just get in there and remove the fill as you're establishing the boundary. Whether or not the commission is comfortable bundling the restoration with an actual construction project, in my view, is another matter. Because that work couldn't be begin until there was the issuance of an order of conditions. And it would be, I think, challenging to issue that order, not knowing where the wetland boundary was.
Could there be some circumstance where, let's say, they were working so far from that BVW3 that it wouldn't be necessary to delineate that boundary? Is that?
I think that's a slippery slope. I do concur with April's assessment that there is a landscape change there. There's definitely a more mature forest as you move towards the easterly section of the property. So the likelihood would be that the wetland, would not expand tremendously, but you're talking about likelihoods there. You're not talking about a scientific evaluation. Ultimately, it's up to the commit. I mean, it's not the commission's job to design a project or a restoration. It's your job to review one. So, I mean, ultimately, the details lie in whatever the landowner presents to you. And then whether or not you feel comfortable, approving something in a phased manner, based on the details of a proposed project.
I see Beth and April. I just had a couple questions, maybe while Emily's talking. Emily, can you explain for everybody's benefit, or maybe Beth can, what does it mean when we talk about the burden of the applicant in this dynamic? How do we understand the responsibilities of the applicant versus the commission in terms of guiding and designing the project?
You wanted me to speak to that, or Emily?
Whichever one, or both of you.
Let's do it together, Emily. No, Emily, you go first, and I'm happy to comment.
Well, okay. So when an applicant files a notice of intent, the regulations clearly state that the burden of proof is on them to demonstrate that they're meeting the requisite performance standards under the regulations. And the role of the commission is to review that work and to confirm that the standards are being met. And if you find that they're not being met, either deny the work or condition the work in such a manner that the standards will be met.
And there's a presumption involved in this, right? That has to be overcome.
Yes, and yes, within the regulations, there are several presumptions.
The presumptions are of impact, that they have to overcome and demonstrate that they're overcoming the presumption of an impact. Is that the way it works?
That's not exactly how I would describe it, but
maybe. Go ahead.
So the law hinges on the fact that no person may alter a wetland resource. That's the basis of the law, and you have to ask permission if you're going to do an alteration or work that will affect a resource area. And the way you ask permission is you file a notice of intent, and in the notice of intent you identify what the resource areas are, and you describe the effects of the work will be. You're going to alter X number of square feet of bank or whatever, and then there's a presumption that there's this whole series of presumptions in the state regulations about what each resource area supports and is useful, and the interests that are affected by each resource area, and then the work that may influence that. It's too complicated to summarize.
Okay.
But the point is, you file an application. To simplify, you file an application saying, the work I do might alter a resource area. I want to do it this way, and that's the best way. And I'll mitigate, I'll replace wetlands BVW that I destroy or affect. And that's the whole permitting process. And then a completely different process under the Wetlands Protection Act is the enforcement process. If someone has gone out and already affected or altered a resource area, the commission's job is to ask them to fix it. And that's a wholly different process. Sometimes you can do work under an enforcement order. The commission has said, you filled this wetland. I want you to come back with a plan and I want you to describe how you're gonna remove the fill. And in some of those situations, it even ends up being, I'm gonna remove the fill by putting in this road and doing this, and the commission may say, file a notice of intent to do that work. But the process of an enforcement order is completely different from the process of a permit. And under a permit, you're asking permission to do work that may alter a wetland. And I was just trying to simplify the process for the town because I've heard from you that the town has said we don't have the funds to restore wetlands. And my point would be, well, if you're going to be doing work in wetlands and you're going to be filing a notice of intent and you have to do all the work necessary to show how you're going to be doing this work in wetlands, which we know is the situation here, because the road to even cross the driveway to get into the site is going to cross buffer, right? It's going to cross those wetland 1 and 2 buffers to even get into the site. So to deal with wetland 3, I was figuring you could do some kind of special condition that said, when you get in there with your equipment, locate the boundary. But I see that April has her hand up, so maybe somebody else
Yeah,
should come.
and Beth had her hand raised. Thank you, Beth, for that. And Emily. So go ahead, Beth, and then April.
Yeah, I think April may answer my question. I'm interested in what she had said earlier about the buffer zone sort of encapsulating any real significant change that could occur to the wetland line in that area that needs to be mitigated, because, you know, the question really comes down to, if they're going to do a bundled NOI, which would save the town money, obviously, and an NOI that comes forward where there's any kind of impact, mitigation is probably going to be required. So why not include this as part of the mitigation? But the question is, well, how do you put a design together when you have a gap in the wetland line? Well, I think to clarify that a little bit, maybe we and April can provide the information, just look again at that gap and talk a little bit about what kind of change in the wetland line do you kind of propose, or you had said that you thought that the buffer zone sort of would encapsulate the majority of the change of that line. And so I'm just interested in more details on that.
Go ahead.
Sure. Well, we have discussed with the town a new strategy, and based off of really what Emily has stated and concerns brought up by Beth about not knowing the exact boundary, the new idea is for the town to proceed with the filing of 2 notices of intent. One first for the wetland restoration and to delineate that boundary, and one for the new library. And the main reasons are really, as we're just discussed, because delineating that boundary will allow for more accurate and precise planning, because we'll know exactly where that wetland is and if the buffer zone changes. In addition, we think 2 separate filings will facilitate the review of the library NOI, and we are listening to the commission's concerns about the fill in these wetland areas, and addressing them sooner than later are in the interests of the Wetlands Protection Act.
And I had a conversation today, thank you, April, with Mark Stinson, who said that he had spoken with you this week and that you were suggesting possibly a limited project for ecological restoration. Is that how you're conceptualizing it possibly?
Yeah, and we'll look more into what that means, but the first notice of intent will just be for the restoration. So yes, it will be only improving the site over existing conditions.
And do you have any time frame? Because I know that, and this all started with I had gotten a call from Mary Ann, and then I attended a library building committee meeting where they were meeting with their architect, and they had a proposed schedule for permitting that sounded like by fall, they were hoping to start or be completing the permitting process for the library. So how would this fit in with all that?
For this restoration NOI, we're hoping to submit by the end of this month.
Great. All right. That's very helpful, and I really appreciate the information from the select board and from Fuss and O'Neill. I appreciate that. I had a question. Rita, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to add, we have had this discussion with, as April mentioned, with our consultants, and but it has to go before the select board because this will require some additional funding, obviously, in order to do the application, to do the NOI application. And I just wanted to address something that Beth Goodman had mentioned. You know, our hope would be that we could use our town equipment in doing that excavation. If it was left to the contractors who are doing the library, would probably be paying 10 times as much as it would cost us. So part of this is, yeah, there's some cost to doing the NOI, but there's potentially some rather large savings if we're not having our general contractors responsible for that excavation and restoration.
Thank you. So there's really, what I also wanted to share with, there's two more things. One is, I went to the library building committee last week, and as a result of that, there was a recommendation or a request for representatives from the Conservation Commission to meet with the design team for the library in order to help them with their design process. So there is a meeting scheduled for March 16th, I think, at 2 p.m. I was planning on attending it, and Beth is unable to attend it. Mary has agreed to attend it. I think we're both going to be participating by Zoom rather than in person. So I guess I would be looking to the commission and Beth Goodman and for some guidance about how to approach that meeting. And then the second question I have for the commission is, given the feedback we have now that they're developing a notice of intent for this restoration work, does the commission anticipate that it will want to hire a third-party reviewer for that notice of intent? Maybe we should deal with that one first, just so that there's some clarity for everybody.
My initial thought is no, but that's usually something that gets decided actually once you receive the NOI. Like a commission gets it, takes a look at it, decides whether or not they feel like they need third-party review. But this just restoration NOI sounds like it's going to be straightforward enough that we can probably handle it.
The only reason why I raise it is just for the benefit of the select board to plan around that. Obviously, make a decision, and we will make a decision once we open the public hearing, but even some preliminary discussion I thought might be helpful to the town. I guess my feeling is that I think a third-party reviewer would make sense. I'm not an expert in ecological restoration, nor do I feel like I can do that without the assistance of a consultant. So
I feel like it's a small area, and I've written 2 or 3 ecological restoration NOIs, so just throwing that out there.
We also
No,
don't
I
know.
know, I know you have
what they're-
expertise. I know you have expertise. I also don't know what your availability would be if it involves having to go out on site during the work week. So I'm also just being mindful about all that, but maybe there's some way to work around that.
we
Yeah,
also
well,
don't know
what do
you
other
know-
people think? I mean, what
You
do
don't
other
know
commissioners?
what they're gonna, with the NOI, what consultant they're gonna do, and maybe whatever they have to say is not gonna be something to question. Or will be adequate for what we want to look at. You don't know till you see it, right?
We won't know until we see it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Scott, Robin, do you have? any-
Actually, Mary said what I was gonna say, so I'm good.
Yeah, I
Robin?
agree.
Okay, all right. So,
I think
Any-
Rita has her hand up.
yes, Rita.
I would just like to remind the commission that we have spent tens of thousands of dollars here. And the town is the applicant, and the town is gonna be hiring a consultant in likely Fuss and O'Neill, but it is again up to the select board. So I would, encourage this commission to be thinking about the expense and the amount of money when you think about third-party consultants.
Thank you. All right, how about any guidance for this meeting with the building committee?
So we're there just basically to look at what they're thinking about and give them and listen to them. We're not there in an official capacity to rule on anything. Correct?
We can't rule on anything.
Yeah, I mean, I see this as a pre submission type meeting. And I don't know if there'll be other sort of agencies that are requiring any kind of permitting to be there. The meetings similar to this that I've been at in other towns would have health departments or ZBA or planning board, whoever else is requiring some kind of an application, meeting together with the applicant, talking about potential layouts of the project, and then talking about your concerns coming from the Conservation Commission, basic ideas of where the resource areas are and what we would be expecting in an application in terms of staying inside, outside resource areas, and then mitigation if you're inside, outside those. That's what I would think the meeting's going to be, if that helps you, Miriam, at all.
Is there anything, since Marianne, since you're here, that you're looking for in that meeting so that we can, maybe discuss it now?
So I think the architects are looking for your priorities, for the commission's priorities. What is important to you? What kinds of mitigation have you found successful in the past? What kinds of impacts are permissible? What kind of impacts really you would prefer that they avoid? So I think it's that. I think they're just sort of looking for guidance from the commission about what the commission's priorities are and what your initial reactions are to their proposals for citing the library on the site. And then I also think it'll just be informative for you and you can bring it back to the commission. This is the designers and the civil engineers and the landscape architect all do have a lot of experience designing projects in and around wetlands and other challenging sites. So it would be an opportunity for you to see their skill level And it might, I think it'll probably be comforting for you. You'll feel confident in their abilities, I would think.
I was,
And
I was impressed with the architect, and you're also with your project manager. They seem very, very competent and knowledgeable. One of the questions they asked of me, and I didn't have an answer for this, is how would we react to the septic system being in a buffer zone? It's a large septic system, and it's going to have to be mounded. It's going to be a raised system. It's going to be about, I think they said 5,000 square feet. You know, there's very limited places where they can put it. And they threw out some different layouts, which I took screenshots of, and I could show them to people, or I can send them to people if that's helpful. I don't think it's really necessary right now because nothing has been decided, but my guess is that we would like to see things as far away from the BBWs as possible. So if there's if something has to be in a buffer zone, you know, the outer 50 feet of the buffer zone would be more desirable than the inner 50 feet. And I think particularly for a septic system, as much out of the buffer zone as possible, if that is possible. I think the other thing I wonder about is a priority is really preserving buffer zone vegetation as much as possible. So I know there was a discussion about moving the library into the tree line. And if that's necessary, that is what it is. I don't know how the other members of the commission would feel about it if they were doing that because they were trying to avoid the highly disturbed, cleared buffer zone in the north part of the property. I'm wondering whether that makes sense or not.
so you're saying taking down trees in upland areas just to get away from wetland areas?
Yeah, they were talking, if you think about, and it's hard to do this without looking at a picture. If you can give me 1 second, I think I can pull.
Get the pictures.
What?
I have the report. So let me I have their whole presentation.
Here, I've got it right here. I can.
Got it? Okay.
Now, so this was just one of a few screenshots and that I took. There were different layouts, and so it's hard to see here, but this little dotted white line is the tree line. And so in this layout, the library itself is entirely in the tree line, within the tree line. And in this scenario, the septic system is behind the library and it's mostly out of the buffer zone. And then the parking area is over here on the east side of the property. They're also talking about wanting to make this as close to as possible a net zero building, which is wonderful. And it's great that the town is committed to that. But that will also require some additional tree removal for shade reduction, I imagine, on the south side here. I mean, the septic system will accomplish some of that, I would imagine, because that's all cleared. But this area here, which is vegetated and has got trees, there'd be some reduction. So this was one of the scenarios. There was also a layout where they had this library a little tighter up against this buffer zone. And what I was commenting on was that up here is the open line that has been not defined. You know, if it's pretty contained, the buffer zone line isn't going to move appreciably, but you know, we don't know. It's all hypothetical. It's conjecture. We don't know until we know. So that's, I think, and then there was also one of the designs had the septic system up here in the front northeastern part of the property. And I wonder about that being even possible because of the proximity to the neighbor's well. I don't know if it is. Is this the best layout for us to be looking at, Marianne, or are there others?
Well, it's early, you know, we're still in early. But let me see if this is the one. Do you want to let me share my screen?
Yeah, sure. Let me undo this.
So this is another, can you see that?
Yep.
So then in this one, the tree line is behind the library. And I think this is the one where I don't see where the septic
Where would the
system is.
septic go?
Yeah, I don't see where it is. Let's see. Yeah, I don't see it.
The original design.
Yeah. Well, so none of these are, you know.
Yeah.
So, okay, this is the one you showed, right? Okay. Well, no, this isn't the one you showed. So, so this is one, you know, so really they're kind of all over the place. And by next Thursday, when they have that meeting, they will have gone back. And so this is the one that you just showed, Miriam, right? So I don't see the one. And this is that, does this one have it? This one doesn't show it, but there was one in that meeting where they showed the septic system up front. And I'm not.
They also showed, they had another one where the building is rotated 90 degrees. And
Right. Okay, so that's this one.
Yeah.
And then the septic is on the other side. And the downside to this one is it's really not, well, so then it would have a flat roof that was not flat, but the roof would be raised so that it would have all solar potential and all southern exposure. The septic, you can see where the septic system is. But then the profile from the road's not very nice on that one. This, let's see if this is the one. Again, they've got the septic in the back on this one, and we're probably not going to go with an L-shaped building just because that's a more expensive building to build. It's less efficient. I'm going to see if I scroll up. Yeah, I don't see that one with the septic system up front, and we're going to find where the neighbor's well is, and you know, the Board of Health is going to help us do that research to see if that's a feasible option. But they did have one where they proposed, you know, where they were just looking at the septic system up front.
So,
and then it could,
I mean, obviously, you know, there's design issues around, you know, where the best location is in terms of the groundwater and where you can put the septic system. And, you know, we can't really opine on that now, except that I guess, if you're looking for some guidance, I don't know if the commission feels like there's any general principles here, but it seems to me that preserving as much tree cover, the tree canopy as possible is would be a good thing.
April might have a better map. She has her hand up.
I do, because they Fussin O'Neill is part of the civil team, and we were part of the kickoff today. I don't want to steal their thunder though and share their designs, but I will say they have really done an excellent job with 3 different scenarios that are minimizing impacts within the buffer zone. And every single layout they have, you can see how they're wiggling and staying as far away from the wetlands as possible. And I've been really, really impressed by the consideration that they've put and the thought that they've put in these designs. And I'm sure they'll still continue to work on them. And I know they are aware of certain setbacks, even with stormwater and the septic system. But I will let them present on that.
I
to
don't
the
know if
commission.
we've answered your question about mitigation, Marianne. I don't know if there's any more guidance that would be helpful. And, you know, maybe Beth could comment on what kinds of mitigation are common with projects like this. My understanding is sometimes it can involve restoring a wetland or, you know, even creating a wetland. Restoration, that kind of mitigation, creating wetlands is tricky because sometimes it doesn't work. And so sometimes it could involve, I think, things like some perpetual conditions. So there might be some areas, right? Wouldn't this possibly be mitigation? Sometimes is saying that there's going to be a no disturb area or some area where only native vegetation is going to be allowed, things like that. Beth, do you have any other thoughts? And
Me, Beth, or the other Beth?
you, Beth.
Yeah, those are all good things. Definitely restoring areas that are impacted. So the area that we're talking about is always a potential, and then creating new wetland, like you said, can be difficult. Yeah, there's things like, yeah, definitely invasive removal if there is some out there, and then replanting with native vegetation is in various areas, is good restoration methods. But I think you have quite an opportunity with that area where there's all the dumping. You know, it's all based on square footage of impact. So it sounds like from April that they're really trying to minimize their impact area. So that's all good.
And mitigation can also be offsite. It's not desirable, but sometimes when there is no good mitigation opportunity on a property, an applicant can propose mitigation somewhere else. Go ahead, April. You had your hand-
Although we are submitting 2 separate NOIs, or that's the intention right now, pending financial approval. We were hoping that because the town is pursuing this restoration of the 2 BVWs, that could be considered as restoration and some sort of mitigation when the Conservation Commission is looking at the library NOI. I just wanted to throw that out there as a possibility because the town is pursuing this restoration on a faster timeline and taking note of what the commission has said. And, you know, does want to provide any buffer zone mitigation for the new library. And I think restoring the wetlands beforehand is definitely a great potential for that.
Scott, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, thanks. Maybe just a couple thoughts on all that's been shared. And it is difficult to share or to make specific comments when we don't have anything really in front of us specifically to act on. So you asked for general principles, and I do think avoidance is the general principle that I appreciate the work that's been done to do that. And I think just continuing on with that is going to be important to avoid impacts. We're off wherever possible, to minimize where it can't be avoided. I don't know that having a commission member, there to talk about specifics beyond that. I'm not sure what that would accomplish, but I do think that that would be the primary principle at work. And then for mitigation, typically you're looking forward to replace like kind, as closely as possible. And I don't know, April, the restoration, to me, that depends on, if those wetlands were violations of the act, then I would think that restoration itself is an act unto itself to put them back the way they were versus, replacing a lost function and value, from other impacts that may be realized from the creation of the library. So I think to me that it kind of depends on if those were violations post-act, or if they were.
Let me try to understand what you're saying. So are you I thought where you were going is that if it's the restoration is being pursued because there was a violation that's being corrected, that as mitigation, it may not balance out the impact. Development.
That is what I'm saying.
Because it's kind of bringing things back to the status quo, and then there's the impact of the library on top of that, is the development, is what you're saying. So I guess it would depend on how much, whatever that mitigation would look like, if there's more that we want besides the restoration.
That's at least my initial thought.
Okay. But that'll have to be figured out. And I don't know if, I don't know how if we can tie one permit to another in that way. We can piggyback those.
Yeah, that would be my question. I guess maybe Beth, the other Beth, might have some insight into that, whether you can really use restoration that you've done under one NOI as mitigation under a separate NOI.
Do you want me to answer, Miriam?
Yes, please.
Not in my experience. There are some resource areas where restoration gives you some kind of right to build, like in the riverfront, and Emily can probably, if she's memorized the State Wetland Protection Act regulations, can probably tell us exactly what section that is. But in this case, for example, you're just taking removing fill from a BVW, you're just remedying a violation. So I don't see how remedying a violation gives you mitigation credit for additional alteration. That's exactly what you just said. Yeah. So, certainly the commission could be open to what would be proposed in a narrative, but I don't see why that, and especially as they're done in two different notices of intent, because there are two different projects.
Okay. All right. Did anybody have any other comments? I don't know. Is Emily still here? Let me see. Maybe she's left. No, Emily's
still here. I'm still here.
Emily, did you have anything to add on that?
No, I think I would echo what Scott and Beth had just summarized.
Okay. All right. Is that clear to everybody else? Does that need to be? I think Beth reframed it very clearly to me. That would help. That, remedying a violation may not give enough mitigation credit for additional alteration. Kind of the takeaway from that. And that's something we would have to decide, and we haven't decided that at this point. We really can't until we see the application, I think. Okay. And could mitigation could include improvements, for example, to wetland resource areas elsewhere on town property, for example. Is that right? True?
You're asking me that? Or the other Beth?
You, Beth.
In the work that I've done in Wetlands Protection Act, it's frowned upon unless the site itself doesn't provide opportunity for there's just no way. Then you can go off site. And I do think there's an ability for the same landowner to use other land to mitigate. But my understanding with most commissions has been, tell me what you can do on this site for this wetland, for this site that you're affecting, and then we'll see where else we have to deal with.
And in terms of the scope of mitigation under the Wetlands Protection Act, it's a 2-to-1 ratio, right?
Yes.
Usually it's so for every square foot, there's 2 square feet of mitigation or restoration. Is that?
Well, again, depending on the resource area, right? So there's different
Or am I getting this confused with riverfront area, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So not relevant to this necessarily, but the commission can decide under the bylaw what we would consider to be mitigation. We aren't tied only to the Wetland Protection Act. The bylaw gives us latitude as well.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So any other, I think we're kind of talked this out, unless there's anything more. Are we good? Okay. I think let's move on then. And I think the only other thing we have some site visits that we need to schedule for 56 North Laurel Drive and for 70 Cooleyville Road. We can't schedule those at this point until we know for sure that there is, the snow is removed. Commissioners, do you want to go ahead with the highway department and do a site visit, or do you feel like your questions were answered sufficiently with Tim here tonight?
I think I got the questions answered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fine.
So we won't, we'll not seek that, and just those 2 site visits when we have an opportunity. And I'll keep an eye on the snow and be in touch with you guys when we think we can schedule that. And I'd like to be able to do that site visit for 70 Cooleyville Road, ideally on a weekend when Beth, or late afternoon when Beth could be here, because we may want to take a look at the soils, and I'd like to get your input on the soils. I'll bring my that question. Okay. All right. I think I've got everything in the agenda. I don't think there's anything we've missed.
So I did send it, your email, the section from the minutes.
Okay.
The yellow act that I could find, so y'all should have that in your email.
The section from the minutes.
Yeah, I couldn't find the PDF, but the minutes just have a little box with what the wording was, which isn't much different than what we said, but you can just take a look at that. I couldn't find a mock-up. I thought I had one, but
yeah,
I'll
this
check.
is all, I don't have it. Okay. So,
Hey, Mary?
yes.
Before we adjourn, maybe, and before Rita leaves here, I was wondering maybe for a future action item, we talked a little bit about how we work proactively with the highway department. And I'm thinking, we're coming up on spring. Last year, we did do some wetland identification near dirt roads. I think those are the ones that where we tend to see more concerns with culverts and stormwater features and that type of thing. And I'm not sure what our next steps are to work proactively with the town to put in place a process. If the MOU that Rita had mentioned is really null and void, then what is our process moving forward there to try to avoid problems proactively? And we left that topic and we didn't come back to it. And maybe we can reserve that for a future agenda item, but I did want to put a pin in it because we're coming back to spring and a good opportunity to identify some of those wetland features along roads. And I don't want to spend time doing it if it's not of interest to the town.
No, I think.
Rita, did you want to comment?
Yeah, this discussion has not taken place with the select board, so I'm here tonight having done my research. And I will bring it up to the MOU up to the select board at our meeting on Tuesday night, and then talk about sort of how we move forward from there. So thank you for asking.
Yeah, that would be, and so then whatever the results of that is, and maybe you'd come back and share that, we could find a way forward on it, or
yes,
find our course of action. Awesome. Thank you, Rita.
Rita, I just want to make one comment just to response to your feedback. And I don't want to have a long discussion tonight about it, but I feel like some clarification about the comment I made in the email about asking everyone to remain calm and be professional really came from several interactions that I was present at and some interactions on email where there was a lot of emotions being expressed that were not constructive being directed toward the commission. We're doing our best as volunteers. We're trying to be very respectful and trying to be flexible. And I hope tonight you heard us trying to be reassuring to Tim that we want to support his work. And certainly the comments that I made, I've made to him multiple times, and I've made in emails. So I think I've been consistent in that. And we all need to be able to work without having to deal with people getting their emotions taking over the conversation. So just was really trying to make a plea for this discussion to remain calm so that we can just focus on the issues and not be having to respond to a lot of emotionality. Makes it harder for us.
Can I just, I just had just one comment, and that is, I think to the extent possible that we don't use email exclusively to communicate, stuff just gets, it raises the emotions, and I think, a conversation, and if, I would encourage you, Miriam, or any of the commissioners, if conversation becomes a problem, to bring it back to the, with a town employee, to bring it back to the select board. But, I have in the mind that, we're all working towards the same goal, and that, when we start communicating with each other through email exclusively, it creates a lot of problems. I mean, I saw it in my professional life. And I'm seeing it, as a select board member. So I would just, encourage all of us again. And, I agree, we've got to tamp it down. Their emotions do get in the way. And, I, for one, just want to calm the waters and keep moving forward. So, and sometimes, we are taking a few steps back when emails start passing along like they were. So that was my point. So thank you. And thank you for tonight. I appreciate all the hard work the commission is doing.
Well, we appreciate the efforts the town is making. We feel like this discussion tonight was very constructive and productive. And I'm just feel very good about all of it, and am glad to be able to have this dialogue tonight. So I really appreciate Marianne and April and Rita, you and Tim coming tonight and communicating with us. Okay, think we're done for tonight. So,
Motion to adjourn.
okay,
Second,
okay, David,
Aye.
Font, I, Harrington,
aye.
Hi.
Wilson.
I beat
Thank
you
you,
to it
Beth.
this time.
Thank you, Beth and Emily. Thank you, Beth and Emily.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Night.
Night.